Okay, so my overall take was your label that you use should be a combination of what your core beliefs are, what the political utility is of that label, how are other people going to interpret that label. That really matters when we're choosing how to identify ourselves. That's why we choose different labels, is because other people are going to be hearing that. It's not just for self-identification. And also, it should be like your grouping. So if you're going to be in politics as this label, you're probably going to work with people who are a part of this label. Maybe if you're a socialist or a Democrat or a democratic socialist, of course you're going to be working with people on the left or whatever, but you have like a particular camp, and that camp should have unique ideas to make that label's utility make sense. And I just don't think the label socialist today makes any sense, especially when your standard for being a socialist and qualifying for, those values or whatever, just basically means you are a little bit more edgy about social democratic positions. So like higher taxes on the rich, worker representation on boards, maybe you like worker co-ops, you want to push for those a little bit. Like that isn't really a socialist thing. That's like a little bit of a socialisty idea, in my opinion. In this current landscape, you can't really advocate for socialism. And in the conversation of VAUSH, he doesn't believe socialism is even possible in his lifetime. So, in my opinion, it would be more honest and more correct and more useful to call yourself a like progressive or something that doesn't already have generations of baggage, especially when you don't even yourself believe socialism is possible. If I wanted to, I could, and people told me, like, oh, Vosh doesn't think social democracy is good enough. He isn't going to settle with that. Well, I don't want to settle with anything. If I wanted to choose my most idealistic label, I could call myself, and people in chat gave me this idea to call myself a utopian. Like I want a utopia. It's gonna all be perfect. Food's gonna fall from the sky like Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, and I have an actual like economic plan to get us there. Eventually, I'm not happy with socialism or communism or anything. I'm actually gonna push past that because all of these systems just aren't good enough for me. So I can choose my most idealistic position, but in my opinion, that's not what your label should be. Do you think explicitly socialist organizations like the DSA aren't worthwhile? Feels like the only type of organization that has broader organizing outside of elections. No, I think democratic socialism can make sense if you're going to organize as a third party within the Democratic Party. But no matter what, I don't like anybody who wants to make real political change. I don't like them having the label socialist. You carry so much baggage with that label. There is no reason you need to be a socialist, and there is no reason, instead of being a socialist, that you can't be a working class Democrat, that you can't be a pro-union Democrat, that you can't be a Democrat who advocates for higher taxes, that you can't be a Democrat who advocates for worker ownership or like worker representation on boards. Right now in this current system, and this was my big issue with the entire VAUSH thing, VAUSH acts identically to anybody who is a social democrat that you could find in this current system. Him being a socialist literally doesn't matter. The label socialist is great for the online stuff, but it literally doesn't matter. Especially when you have no standards and I understand his argument. He wants everybody to be a socialist, so he wants the barrier to entry to be very low. That's why he has his take on Hasan. He wants it to be very chill to be a socialist. For example, many Democrats and Republicans, most voters vote in a partisan manner. People don't have really complex thinking patterns when they go to the ballot office. So VAUSH wants electoral power for socialists. So the reason he doesn't want to say, like, hey, Hasan should be held to a higher standard because he's a socialist is because VAUSH wants a wine mom eventually to say, yeah, I'm not that into politics, but I'd probably be a socialist. He wants Democrat right now, or he wants what is considered to be like a progressive right now, to eventually be a socialist, which doesn't make much sense to me. Because if you dissolve the word socialism to mean, oh, I'm for higher taxes, I'm for more worker representation, I'm for unions, if that's what socialist means anyway, what is the difference between a social democrat and a socialist? What, you tweet different? You make different YouTube videos? Like, honestly, what is the difference between those? I know why the DSA does what they do. They want to say we are the third party within the Democratic Party. they're going to get political power through those means. I still don't like the label socialist, but in general, why call yourself a socialist and not just a working class Democrat? Why not be the working class coalition within the Democratic Party? Why do people need to hold on to the socialist label? Why do they need to hold on to a label that holds so much baggage? There is literally no necessity to this. I don't understand, unless if somebody in chat disagrees with me. Is there a necessity? Like, do we need to have the label socialist attached to everything we freaking do? Or whenever I have to talk about Bernie Sanders, do I need to go through why the USSR wasn't actual socialism? Although it was left-wing principles gone authoritarian. It 100% was. You can't just say it was right-wing. Every time I have to sell a policy to somebody, I have to do the heavy lifting of saying why socialism isn't bad. Are you kidding me? Do you know how dumb and like, oh my God, it's so directionless. It's so pointless. Like, it makes me so upset because we can be advocating for these popular policies, but we're being held down by this reluctance to modernize this approach. Like, what does socialism even mean? Like, nobody in America, no politician in America, even Bernie Sanders, who calls himself a democratic socialist, nobody is advocating for full worker ownership of anything. They aren't able to. We aren't at that place since this, like, there just is no pragmatic utility to it. What's the most socialist thing Bernie Sanders ever said? He wants to or he wants to have more nationalized like energy grids. He said that once in his Green New Deal plan. That's probably the most like socialist-y thing. Should we also get rid of the term feminism because it also has a lot of baggage? No. We should get rid of the term toxic masculinity and the term white privilege. We should stop using those terms and relying on those terms because those have an automatic negative connotation to them. Feminism doesn't have a negative connotation to most people. There is no history of that doesn't hold the same weight. If you think that's comparable, I would strongly disagree. Yes, the polls on socialism are becoming more popular in the US over time, but I really don't care about those polls. Those polls are weak. Those polls are very weak. VAUSH basically only cares about optics, and all his arguments are filtered through that lens. He doesn't care about optics because his arguments suck. The way he was talking yesterday, it really was so wordy. Do you know those rappers who are made fun of for being like overly complex with their rhyme schemes? Does anybody know, like, I guess Eminem is the one that's actually decent at it, but there's a lot of YouTube rappers that do this, where they make everything sound really complex for literally no reason. It's the whole meme with I'm a lyrical, spiritual miracle through my stereo, so venereal. It's hysterical. It's a miracle. The way I get tranquility and ability and the skill I see. Like, they have these words rhyming. It's like, or when Eminem did, that's an awfully hot coffee pot. Like, there's no reason for what VAUSH was saying. Using this condescending language, using this verbiage that it sounds condescending by nature because he's using a bunch of big words for no reason, just to like, it sounds like he's trying to just sound smart. And I know this is a meme from Destiny's Twitter, but this meme holds true. I watched around half of that debate from last night. Yeah, like logic. I watched around half of that debate last night. And this is how he sounded. This is how VAUSH sounded. Your entire point is spite-driven. What? Your inability to understand utility. And I can't say that word. I know it's arbitrary. See, I'm too dumb. I'm too dumb. Oh, I'm not. God, I'm too dumb. How do you say that word? Somebody put the phonetic spelling in chat for me. Your inability to understand utility. He's like trying to sound deep and trying to sound a lot more complex than he actually is, making these points. And if you call yourself a socialist, like, I need everybody to ask themselves, what does it mean to be a socialist in America today? If you call yourself a socialist, what pragmatic utility does that have? What does it really mean? And why is that better than calling yourself a social democrat? Because I think you should call yourself what you actually are, participating in the current political system. I think everybody has an ideal future post-scarcity where everybody is living in harmony and everybody owns a piece of society and everybody has some type of, like, vision of the future. Why label yourself as the most idealistic version of your thought, especially when you're very pessimistic about the prospect of socialism ever working? As VAUSH said many times, he doesn't even believe socialism's ever going to work in America in his lifetime. So why, if you don't think this is something that's possible within the next 100 years, why call yourself that? We don't need that magical word. It's not a religion. I don't take political labels typically because I really don't care. I really do not care about capitalism or socialism or social democracy or whatever. I care about general progressivism when it comes to civil liberties and when it comes to fighting for people power. And by people power, I don't mean I mean policies that benefit people and not corporations, and representation for people's issues, even when people can't represent those issues on their own. Even when it comes to owning party politics, like I said, Bernie Sanders, one of the hardest things for me selling him to other people in the primary was he's not a real Democrat. He's a socialist. He's too radical for me. If you present ideas in a way that doesn't seem radical, those ideas are more likely to take place and more likely to seem commonplace. If anybody wants to argue with me, or if you know any content creators who would disagree with me, I'd be glad to have a conversation about that.